Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and welcome to another team building video. Today we're going to be covering Seele and her most optimal teams based on the information we have so far from closed beta 3. It's unlikely she'll change too much other than some number tweaks for launch, so this should be pretty good info if you decide to pull for it. So in order to understand what teams she's going to be good in though, we have to understand what she does. Let's dive into it. So Seele is a quantum hunt character who's going to specialize in single target as a result of that. She's really good to bring to fights who have quantum vulnerability, but she's also pretty good to bring to neutral fights as well, as long as you get some decent gear. Her basic attack is going to deal 100% of her base damage, but unlike other characters, she actually has a special trace which enhances them. After you use a basic attack, you'll get 20% of a free turn every single time you do so. So essentially, she's going to be 20% faster while using a basic attack than other characters. This means it's not too bad if you do have to end up using a basic attack with Seele. It's not ideal, but it's not too bad. Her skill really is her bread and butter though. Like all damaging characters, it deals over double the amount of her basic attack. In addition to that, her skill also generates additional energy compared to her basic attack. The basic generates 20 and the skill generates 30. So even though she has that benefit on the basic, you're still going to want to be using the skill the majority of the time if you can, and you should build the team around her so that she can do so. Also, Seele will get 2 turns of a speed buff after using the skill, meaning you really do want to keep that active and use that skill often. Her ultimate, Butterfly Flurry, will enter the buffed state as she uses it, and then after in the buffed state, she will deal damage equal to 400% of her attack. Now, the buffed state is a 80% increased damage buff, and it lasts for 1 turn. The way this plays out is as follows. You use the ultimate, and on immediate activation, it'll give you 80% increased damage. Right after, it will deal the 400% of attack damage, and then your next turn, you will still have the buffed state for 1 turn. So you can use a skill or a basic attack, and it will have that 80% increased damage. That is her normal kit there. Now, her talent is a little bit special. Of course, it does contain the text for buffed state here, which we just described, but it also has another effect. When Seele slays an enemy or gets the last hit on an enemy, she will actually gain a buff called Reappearance. Now, Reappearance is essentially going to give her an additional action, a free action, so she can use anything in that turn, a basic attack or a skill. While in that turn, she also gains the buffed state for that action. So essentially you can think of it as a free turn which has the buffed state for you. And overall that will be her talent. She also gets 20% quantum penetration while in the buffed state as well, meaning that she's a pretty good character against neutral enemies who have just a little bit of quantum resistance, meaning she's actually really good in a lot of scenarios. Now you might be thinking, well, okay, so she's got to get this kill streak going on. If she's not getting that, she's not getting too much value. Well, actually, Seele has the highest single target damage in the game currently, even if she gets no resets. So she's actually a pretty good candidate for bringing to pretty much any single target scenario where you want some damage, as long as they're not resistant to quantum. Now, because she is a event banner character, it is possible to get multiple copies of her very deterministically if you have the finance. So we are going to cover her Eidolons, as that may be of interest to you. So when we take a look at her Eidolons, you can see that the most powerful Eidolon, which is within reach of most players, is going to be Eidolon 1. Eidolon 1 will allow the speed boost from Seele's skill to stack up to 2 times. This is a massive damage increase, which can be about 20% more damage just from this Eidolon alone. Now it will also increase the costs in running Seele, which we'll cover when we get to the team section. The second Eidolon here is going to give you 15% crit against enemies who are lower than Seele's 50% lower enemies. So basically when they're on lower life, half life or lower, you get that 15% crit, which is pretty good. Means you only have to build 85% crit on her instead of 100. Eidolon 4 is a bit underwhelming. Basically, she'll gain 15 energy on kill as an additional gain. Right now, killing an enemy grants 10 energy, so instead for Seele, it'll be 25, which will be pretty good. Allow you to chain together those ultimates a little bit better. And Eidolon 6 really is where she becomes a complete monster. As with all characters, their Eidolon 6 is completely insane. I can say that this is probably going to be roughly 3 to 4 times her damage if you construct the team around this Eidolon. But we're not going to talk about that because that is solidly in whale territory. But I'll give you guys a few hints. If you do decide to get Eidolon 6, you're going to be looking at using Welt in your team. Alright, now that we understand Seele's kit, we're most likely going to be talking about base Seele as well as Eidolon 1 Seele so that we can talk and cover because that's what most people are going to probably have access to. Alright, let's construct some teams. As always, we've got a 7-cycle fight here, which represents the average time that a endgame fight will go for in the Forgotten Hall if you're aiming to get the time requirements down. And constructing teams around that so that they're balanced and work under those conditions is going to be our goal here. So of course we need to have our main character here, Seele, and our ideal scenario is going to be that she can use her skill freely whenever it's her turn, as well as at pretty much every opportunity when she gets a reset. So in order to do that, we should probably simulate exactly how much speed she's going to have when she has her speed boost, and that's a 25% boost, so she's going to end up with 143 speed here. Now you can see in 7 cycles she's going to end up with 10 actions. Now of course we want her to be able to use her skill pretty much whenever she's got her action and when she's got those resets, so we're going to go ahead and put 10 skills in there. That's what we're aiming to allow her to do. If we wanted to add an extra few in there for some resets, maybe like an extra 2, 3 or maybe even 4 if she gets a lot of resets, that would be just fine as well. We'll try and build with that in mind here. Now because Seele is so hungry, her next up, her partner, is going to have to be someone who's basically not hungry at all. And when constructing teams, you want to look for a sub damage dealer or a secondary damage dealer or someone who forms the role of increasing your team's damage, who basically consumes no skill points or very few. So one of the better teammates for Seele, assuming that the enemy has a weakness or no resistance to lightning, is actually Eidolon. And the reason for that is that Eidolon actually doesn't require any skill points. His main skill there, which he's going to be using, is going to cost life instead of skill points. So he's actually the perfect accompaniment for Seele because she can take up all the skill points for herself, for her resets and everything. And even if you got her even faster with the Eidolon 1, it still wouldn't be a problem because Eidolon isn't taking up any points at all. Now, when we add in our supports, you'll see that we start to fuel Seele, and you can see that our whole team kind of just meshes and works together. So if we add in our healer, Natasha, she's a nice free-to-play option, as well as support. Let's go defensive to start with here, Trailblazer Fire. You can see here that we're consuming 10 points and we're generating 14. Eidolon's not using any, so we're all good there. And we've got 4 points to spare. We could even go ahead and let our Natasha use some skills here and we'd still have enough skill points to play with. Granted, Seele wouldn't get her resets as easily because we don't have any spare points, but don't forget we start the match with 3 points baseline as well. So we're going neutral on our team here, and then Seele gets to use the 3 base points we have however she sees fit for her resets. Now if you wanted to make this even easier for you, you could also add speed. 25 speed, which is on the boots, which is a relic which you can acquire in the mid and end game to give both your supports 25% more speed here. Sorry, not percent, 25 more base speed, so you could go up to 123 here on Natasha, and then 120 over here on Trailblazer, and then each get some extra actions here. So we'd be able to get some extra actions over here and over here. Now we have plenty of skill points. We actually generate 14 and only use 10. So Seele is going to have so many points to play around with here for her resets. And that's going to be pretty good. Now, if we wanted to look and see how this team would function with Eidolon 1, well, her speed would be 172, which gives us 12 actions instead, and this team still works perfectly fine. But the only reason it works is because we have Eidolon here not really taking up any skill points. Now, Eidolon is a free-to-play unit, so pretty much everyone will have access to him. He's also going to be in the shop as a free-to-play option early, so you can deterministically get him immediately without even having to pull for him. So he's definitely a really good pickup, especially if you're planning to play with Seele, as she is just so hungry. Now, it is also an option to play another character here who doesn't necessarily use their skill every turn, but uses their skill situationally and basically goes on and off, kind of cycling between basics as well as skills to kind of get the most out of their kit. And a good example of a character like that would be someone like Sampo or Serval. We'll use Serval here as she is a free-to-play option, and I think that she's probably a pretty good one that most people will have access to. Now, if we get Serval here, you can see here that she's going to be able to use 7 actions per battle. So if we make it so that she uses 4 basics and 3 skills, that should be more than enough to get most of the damage that she's capable of. And the reason for that is that Serval applies a shock with her skill. That shock lasts multiple turns, and then pretty much the rest of her skills all revolve around triggering effects based on shocked enemies. And that can be using her basics, as well as her ultimate, as well as her skill. It doesn't really matter. She doesn't have to spam that skill to get the most out of her kit. So she's a really good accompaniment for Seele as well, because she's not really too worried about using every single skill every single turn. And then you can go ahead and slap in your healer and support here as well. And you'll be basically in the same scenario we were in before. But instead of using Eidolon here, we have a damage dealer here who is just fine taking some turns off. And that's going to be a really good accompaniment for Seele as well. Now, it's actually possible to construct one final team here around Seele, and that is the Hyper Carry support team, as it is very, very powerful, and it actually revolves around one of 2 support carries who will actually take the place of one of your damage dealers. So instead of running Eidolon or a kind of neutral carry here who is going to use like half basic, half skill, you can actually just run a straight up support who is going to like turbo buff Seele. Now, the best option for this is actually Ting Yang. If you're interested, with full gear, fully maxed out, Ting Yang provides Seele over 100% more damage. So it's essentially going to double her damage. Now, this is particularly powerful as Seele is one of the more powerful single target damage dealers in the game, but also by buffing her, you're allowing her to get more opportunities to reset. As she is the star of the show, she's going to be doing the damage of 2 characters now, so she's going to get far more opportunities to reset. And that is why the Ting Yang and Seele combo is so powerful. So how are you going to run your Ting Yang? Well, right now, Ting Yang has an ability called Blessing. Now, Blessing is going to give the target a boost for 3 turns. Now, Seele is already using 12 skills. This is with Eidolon 1, but we'll do worst case scenario here. If you've got Eidolon 0, it's only going to be easier for you. So we need to use a Blessing every 3 attacks. So Ting Yang has to use 4 Blessings. Now, she only gets 8 actions here without speed, so we'd have to use 4 basics and then 4 blessings, so she would be considered a neutral unit. Now, this might be starting to look a little familiar, as we now know that Seele really wants to be paired with a neutral damaging option here. And that's exactly what Ting Yang can do as well. But unlike Eidolon, she's going to be boosting Seele up and really elevating her and, over doubling her damage. More ultimates, way more damage and, really, really big boosts. Really nice there. And then, of course, your other 2 slots here can be pretty much whatever you want. We'll go a little bit different here. We're going to always have to bring our healer here, but in the last support here, we won't use a defensive support. This time, we'll use an offensive support. Now, if you wanted to bring an offensive support, the best one here, in my opinion, to support this sort of a playstyle is probably going to be a defensive shredding support. So someone like Pella would be pretty good. If you're interested, Pella's ultimate is a roughly 22% more damage multiplier for the team. And bringing her would be a pretty good multiplier on top of that. So you're doubling Seele's damage, and then you're doing another 22% on top of that, multiplying all that again. Or you could also, if you have her in the future, if you're watching from the future, could use Silverwolf. Silverwolf would also be an outstanding pick here for a Seele combo. Or, finally, you could also look into a few other options as well. There is also the option of Bronya, but due to diminishing returns, Bronya and Ting Yang, and also the fact that Bronya's uptime on her ultimate is actually kind of low, and you cannot afford to use Bronya's skill on Seele in this situation, it's probably not going to work out too well. So Bronya is probably not the best option in this last slot, unless you have an Eidolon or 2 on him, or like a skill, light cone as well. That's kind of what you need for Bronya to work in this slot. So I'd probably use Pella as a free-to-play option here, and that would be my hyper carry setup here for Seele. And I imagine this is going to be very, very competitive and really give you a lot of play and a lot of fun here. This is really going to take Seele and push her to her limits. The only thing that you could really push further is by using Bronya in this slot. But as I mentioned, you really do need her Light Cone and Eidolon 1 to really support that playstyle and get good uptime on that ultimate to really give Seele what she is looking for here. Now, ultimately, that's kind of how I would personally build Seele, and based on my calculations, it is also a pretty numerically good one as well. So you've got two different options there. You can either bring 2 DPS units, one of them, trying to go neutral, not too crazy on the skills, or you can bring a focused, dedicated Seele team who really focuses on juicing her up to the max. Overall, I think the second option is a little bit better, well, quite a lot better actually, as it does give you a lot of potential with those resets. But at the same time, it's not too insane to go with a double unit as well, because Ting Young is probably going to be a pretty in-demand unit on both sides of your Forgotten Hall, so you might not want to run her with Seele, you might want to run her with a different character here. But overall, that is how I'd go, and that is what I'd recommend. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. If you learned something new, be sure to subscribe for more content, and if you want to see any other characters in this team building format, definitely comment down below. I'll try and get to them next. Until next time, cheers.